welcome in again to another wonderful episode of the Cannabiz Conversations Podcast with me, your grateful host, Sean Welsh. As always, happy to be here. Love the opportunity to talk with great people in the industry. And today's a fun one. This is someone that most people know as, again, I'm an internet stalker when it comes to LinkedIn and learning. And I've been learning from Luna and a lot of people who've been on the show for the last 25, 30 episodes, whatever we're at here. And it's been a lot of fun to do it. Before we get into that, as always, thank you so much to Dustin and the team over at Fat Nugs. Talk about people doing things differently. Talk about people who want to be an actual partner. If you haven't heard yet, Dustin just launched the Employee Recognition Program. Yeah, that's right. People from within the industry are going to be getting call outs on their weekly magazine, guys. Design. If you haven't seen it, you don't know what I'm talking about. Head over to fatnugs.com. Get involved. There's no one better right now to have as a media partner to get the message out than those guys right there. Not to mention, it's beautiful artwork, as you can see here displayed on the desk. All right, let's get into the show. We are very, very happy to welcome in Luna Stower. Luna, how are you today?
I'm fabulous, and I'm also a huge fan of Fat Nugs magazine. So honored to be on the show. Thanks for sponsoring. Thanks for supporting independent media.
Yes. The independent media voice is something we love about them, and we love the opportunity to kind of share that with folks. Thank you for that, Luna. So, Luna, the show starts off in the same way it always does. We like to hear the origin story. We want to know where it all began with Luna and this beautiful plant. So please indulge us.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I was born to work with this plant. It's been finding me, chasing me down, engaging me and keeping me, as her muse and vice versa for a very long time. I was born and raised in the East Bay, near Oakland, California. And basically since 1996, when I was 11 years old, I've been smoking it and selling it and being around the growing of it since I was a little girl. So it was never a drug to me. So by the time I got to UC Santa Cruz and was studying feminist studies with Angela Davis and some other radical Black Panthers and going to 420 sessions and being involved in SSDP and Normal, I really got into an understanding that my use was medical, recreational, spiritual, medicinal, and that it was a human rights issue and a medical sovereignty issue. And that really sparked my interest in it. I got my master's in urban education and social justice and got my teaching credential. I worked in prisons like San Quentin and juvenile halls and jails in Santa Cruz County as a librarian. Also with a parole organization called Center Force, where we did pre and post release planning for HIV positive prisoners. So really, I've been an activist and an advocate my whole life. I was raised by two very progressive New York Jews who met at an ad agency. So this concept of see something, say something, stand up for what's right. In the Jewish culture, I'm culturally Jewish. I'm not really religiously Jewish, but culturally Jewish culture is to really stand up for when you see something that is wrong, because what happened to us and people haven't stood up for us. And so growing up in the Bay Area and being around so many radical folks of color and joining with their causes, it really makes sense that fighting the war on drugs was a next step for me. So about 10 years ago, I left the classroom and started in the cannabis industry, where I worked with, I was the first employee at both Jetty Extracts and iSpire Vape Technology, both of which are vape companies. One manufactures cannabis oil and one manufactures the actual vapes themselves. Both have gone public. So I'm really proud to say that I help small businesses and startups really kind of grow into the space in meaningful ways that stay true to the politics of the plant. Bearing witness to the AIDS epidemic and Brownie Mary and Dennis Peron's work here in California for Prop 215, seeing the devastation of Prop 64 and the over-commercialization, over-regulation, over-taxation, and over-control of cannabis in California, which was kind of adopted everywhere. But then also really proud that I worked on the early equity licensing language groups about 10 years ago in Oakland, which is a very small group of us that has really started a movement around talking about reparations for folks of color and people that have been hit hardest by the war on drugs. So really bringing a lot of that activism into everything that I do, whether it's in the psychedelic space. I speak at a lot of conferences and just been through every point of the supply chain in psychedelic and psychoactives such as cannabis, from seed to sale, everything in between. I work with Vape Safer, which is a 501c6 where we're working with regulators to ensure that everyone has proper regulations on their vape, whether it's manufacturers, terpene companies, and it's a coalition of a bunch of people that would consider us competitors as a group, but we're actually really close friends, and we all have the same interest in mind, that we want to, do this right, do it safely, and keep public responsibility and public health at the core of everything that we're doing, and, you know, do a nod to the legacy and honor the legacy, but be ready to move forward in this regulatory framework that we're seeing rolling out across the world.
So, Luna, we're going to go back a little bit here because, I mean, first of all, I think I have to check the records on this, but 11, I think, is tied for the youngest use plant with my guy Trent Hancock, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to go back and look. We've been joking recently. I'm part of the 14 club, so we were all kind of like that, you know. But it's always the Cali folks. It's always the Cali or the Pacific Northwest folks. I love it, you know, because honestly, growing up in the Midwest, you know, by 11 we were all drinking. Do you know what I mean? So it's sort of this
exactly,
you know, conversation about, well, what was it? What did you see? It was very taboo where we lived, you know, and that wasn't like that. It was different out west. And you can see that through the cultural kind of conversations. I like what you talk about, that the plant, because again, age-old debate. We had it on probably 2 weeks ago with JP Donahue. The idea that this plant has to be only medicine, right? Or has to be only recreational, or has to be something to someone. No. As you say, it's everything to everyone, because that's the magic of the whole thing, right?
Amen.
Yeah, I love it the way you said it, though. I hope the team clips that. Team, if you're listening, please go clip that.
That was a good little clip.
Yeah, the way that was done, it was beautiful, because again, people have to. The idea of having to put something in a silo, right? Like whether it's this, like cannabis has to be this. Alcohol is alcohol. There's a million different variations of alcohol. Some you can use to clean your house. Some you can use to get shit-faced. End of the day, it's all alcohol. You are saying that this plant is so many different things. How you talk about being 11 and getting into it, but when did you really realize that portion of it, Luna? When did that become sort of crystallized in your mind that this plant was more than just something I found when I was young, that because it was around, but it's that it's magical?
Gives me chills because it's actually, what's today, or what's this year? It's 2025. I was a freshman at UC Santa Cruz on 420. That would have been 2003. So this is 20 years ago. Okay. We went to Porter Meadow on 420 and hotboxed the meadow and ate mushrooms for my first time.
Nice.
And I saw the police response to us. And I was like, what the fuck? We are literally all smiling and dancing and connecting, and we are causing no harm. And these dudes are literally ready to tackle us. They're ready to arrest us. They're intimidating us. They're bullying us. And I'm like, last time I checked, I'm literally spending like $7,000 a month to live on campus and go to a UC. Like, y'all are tripping. And then later that year, I applied to be a resident assistant in the dorms for my sophomore year. And I got told on by someone in my hallway, which I found out later because she thought that the smell smelled like poop because her dad used to smoke it in the bathroom. And when he left, she thought that that was the smell of his poop. So it would fill the hall with the smell of poop in her mind. So she like called the campus cops, and they came to my dorm room and like were banging on the door, and I wanted to hide it, but I was like, you know what? I'm not going to hide it. And they like made me flush it down the toilet. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going so hard for this plan. It's ridiculous. Like, this is the biggest conspiracy against something that no one can tell me. And to your point, there were so many people that were blacking out drunk, getting raped, raping other people, breaking their leg, jumping off the stairs on campus. Like, so many young drunk idiots threatening. Someone died in a car accident from a DUI. And I'm like, nothing's ever happened on this plant. Maybe I like forgot to do my homework or passed out early or ate, like maybe gained the freshman 15 because of cannabis, but if none of it was criminal and none of it was hurting myself or anyone else. And they were so focused on the weed, and this is a progressive, this is UC Santa Cruz, y'all.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you're not, you doesn't sound like you're describing and if
but
you
it's
were
the state.
describing that university, it certainly wouldn't be in the fucking 2000s, Luna. Like, that sounds
Right.
like something maybe
I know.
You know, during the Reagan admin, like we got wild about or some shit like that. But like, that doesn't seem reasonable to what I know about the area. But you know, what do I know? I didn't go there, right? So you know better, and you know it was not that way. It was not progressive as you thought.
No, because it's still owned by the state, and the bunk beds that we are sleeping on is still built by prison labor. So the state of California is not progressive. Prop 64 was not meant to legalize cannabis or decriminalize cannabis, which is really what the voters were voting for when they said yes. They wanted to vote to tax control and regulate, which is why we don't use the word legalization here. We use the word commercialization, because the state just wants its money. And you have to remember, we are the 5th largest economy in the world because of our prison labor. We are the largest in prisoner. We have the largest prisons in the world. We incarcerate more people than anyone in the world. Maybe El Salvador is coming up on us, but they're all going to be they're still our prison industrial complex. Even Secot, what we're seeing in El Salvador, these mega prisons are still US funded. So, this goes back to how I knew that it was a conspiracy. I'm like, this plant is safe. This plant makes me feel good. I went to the DPA, the Drug Policy Alliance, and SSCP conference, like when I was a freshman a sophomore in Long Beach. And then the next year I got a scholarship with my friend Ritika to go to the ACLU Women in the Cannabis, like Women in the War on Drugs. And it was all about women who had been incarcerated. And they came and they spoke at this ACLU. And I was like literally 19 and like, what? So once you start seeing the conspiracy and the people that are pushing it down, once you start seeing how it's helping veterans with opioid addiction, how it's stopping seizures in children, you just get enraged that this lie is, it's enraging. And if you're not enraged, you're not an activist.
Yeah, you're not paying attention, because that's
you're not paying attention.
Problem. That's been my problem ever since. I mean, I'm a kid who was diagnosed with migraines at a young age. I had to go through a whole ton of, fucking doctor visits and all this other nonsense. And it was like, what are you going to do? You're going to take all these pills. All the pills hurt my stomach, gave me an ulcer. All right, we'll take the ulcer meds and give you a migraine. I'm like, guys, just, at 17, 18, I'm like, fuck all this. I'm going to use cannabis. I've heard about it. I'm digging in. I'm really going for it. My parents were opposed. Doctors were opposed. Where do you get it? It's illegal. Like, I don't want to hear this shit. So this would have been like we're not that far different in age. I'm probably like 4 years older than you. And so this was like in the late 90s, it's like 99, 2000, 2001. And this is what the conversation in the Midwest, I'm in, Chicago, and there's nothing progressive. It's all kind of stomped down. Fast forward myself to 20 years later, my wife has a traumatic brain injury on the edge of fucking death. And I have to hear a doctor come to me and say, well, it's probably from the fact that she tested positive for cannabis. And I'm just like, dude, I'm going to sue this fucking hospital if my wife doesn't come out of that fucking room.
Straight up.
I will not stand for this. And now we learned through our lawyer that it's stamped on her record in the state of Wisconsin. So when she goes to receive any care at any hospital, the first thing they're going to ask her is she on drugs? Is she a drug addict? And it is one of the most disgusting fucking things in the world. And it's part of the prohibition. It's part of the whole stuff down mentality, And so, yeah, it's it won't matter when I leave here, and I'm planning to leave here, but there's other economic factors in the world that prevent me from doing so right now. But it doesn't matter. The point is that I have been fighting in the same way you have for acceptance of something that shouldn't need this much work to be accepted. It shouldn't need. The state of Wisconsin used to be the #1 producer of hemp in the 1850s. What? Like, what did we forget? Did we forget that we have fertile land, that we can do things in better ways than we ever have? Luna,
and it's our birthright. Make America hemp again, bro.
It's good. Birthright. This is what I'm talking about. Not enough people talk about it. Birthright. That's a real thing that because it's a plant. Again, I just went out, it's early April here, so we all go get our garden supplies. And I went out and bought me a couple of little baby plants. They're basil and rosemary. Okay. All right. But the point is that they're plants. You don't cause me any issue when I go buy food, when I buy product of plants, right? At grocery stores or anywhere else. So why the plant? Luna, in your experience, what do you find is, how do I say this? What do you find is the biggest pushback people give you, or fuck that? What's the best reason that you've got? And because none of them have been acceptable to you, so I assume none have been good enough. But what's the best reason, both for the fact that it was ridiculous or that you were like, maybe it made sense? What's the excuses you've heard from people over the years why this exists the way it does?
A deep requirement for control and over people's bodies and minds. They control the way we relate and have relationships with a plant and our bodies. They gaslight us and make us think that we don't know what's going on. To your point about the migraines, like, I know the second I consume cannabis that it's good for me. I don't need these, my dad and mom sending me AOL.com studies and stuff. I'm like, first of all, who reads AOL.com news? Second of all, I don't need Rutgers or whoever to tell me what this is doing to my brain. And to your point about your wife, the neuroprotective elements, the stress lowering elements, literally the two biggest causes for disease and problems in our culture is from high levels of stress and cortisol, which it helps with, lack of sleep, which is when we reproduce all of our cells, which it absolutely helps with, mood, connectedness, which helps with depression, which is a major cause of suicide in the United States, and over reliance on opioids and pharmaceuticals, which cause all kinds of contraindications like you're talking about.
And now I think we're closer to the point though, right, Luna? Right there,
yes.
Right? When we start talking about the overstep of a plant into pharmaceutical and how it replaces all of these other things that are not necessary. And the fact that we're not willing to invest in it for our military, for our veterans, I think is one of the biggest travesties of the whole thing, because
and punish them and take their bennies when they do use it.
Exactly. And you were willing to test all kinds of shit on them over the last 50 years. You're willing to put them through whatever it is.
Tuskegee,
whatever, but you won't.
Area 51.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. But this is the other thing too, is like, I always challenge whenever you meet a nurse or a doctor or interact with a nurse or a doctor yourself for like in the world or in a clinical setting as a patient, ask them about their training on the endocannabinoid system. And if they have had no training on the endocannabinoid system, educate them. And if they are not interested, do not go to that doctor or nurse. Ask for another nurse or doctor. What they sign a Hippocratic oath.
Yep.
The Hippocratic oath not only means that if they see someone dying on the street, they have to render aid, but it also means that if they cannot provide sufficient information or care for a patient, they have to legally recommend you to someone else.
Luna, I had the doctor that told me that. He ended up getting suspended. I mean, the whole thing. And I don't. Somebody asked me if I felt bad. Get the fuck out of here. No, I don't feel bad. You're uneducated. You're speaking about something that is not fair, and you know nothing about it. You did one test to find out that you tested positive for cannabis. That gives no window of access of use. You have no idea when that transpired. You don't know where it came from. I know
could have been topical.
I know the fucking farmer. So it's not like this. It's not like you think, right? So it's what bothers me. It's frankly why we started this show, was because I just get tired of a lot of people having a singular sort of thought and opinion that just isn't open to any other outside influence or direction. And so people in cannabis have been talking about the power of the plant. You hear it everywhere we go. And maybe it's an echo chamber because I hang out and listen to a lot of the same people in the industry, right? So maybe it's that. But as I start to span out, right, I start to look at it. My measurement of where cannabis is at, my parents, okay? You're talking about people that are in their late 70s, early 80s, in the Midwest. They've never left. And now I got my dad talking to me about gummies and going to bed and doing this, doing that. I'm thinking to myself, okay, you know what I mean? Like, yes, I know no one's satisfied with the progress. Do you know? I don't think anyone will ever be satisfied with the progress, but can we just for a second try to remember that this is a gigantic Titanic of a ship to move. It involves government. It shouldn't, Luna. It should be your birthright. It should be that easy, but you're reasonable enough and educated enough to know it isn't that easy. Unfortunately, it should be, but there's just so much fucking bureaucracy, Luna, that it's tough to get through. Luna, right now, as we wrap up the first half, where can folks go to really get a part of the advocacy? Because I feel it from you. I get that that's really a power of you. Where can folks get involved, in your opinion, to make the most of their time and effort?
Things come up all the time. I recommend following me on Instagram, Luna_Stower. I post a lot of things, but we have Unity Day coming up that Last Prisoner Project puts together in DC every 4/20 at the National Cannabis Fest. Where it's like, I think 30 or 40 nonprofits came together to lobby together. I was just up a couple weeks ago in Sacramento with Normal, and NCIA just had their stakeholder summit. Everyone's pushing really hard on showing up and showing out and giving, telling folks, in California, we're having a major tax hike that's going to happen on July 1st. So we're begging them not to, because it's going to kill everyone in the industry. It's going up to 20%. It's a huge increase and it's already too high. So we are, that is the most important thing. Definitely follow CCI or like your industry associations they're not all perfect. You know, there's a lot of controversy and what people say or do or whatever. But I believe that if you care about this movement, you're going to put your dollars towards lobbying, whether you're doing it independently or joining a, you know, for $1,000 a year, $5,000 a year, you can join NCIA and you can make sure that your voice is heard. You can be on a committee. I'm on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee because we're trying to keep DEI alive during these times, and acknowledge that we need to make sure that equity operators are surviving and that we have a responsibility as the National Cannabis Industry Association to do that. You've got compassionate veterans led with Recompass here in the Bay Area that do support of veterans and compassionate donations. You've got the Equity Trade org with Ramon and Nina Parks and Itzhak and a lot of folks that have small businesses and equity businesses that got together and they do a lot of cool work. You know, there's just MJ Unpacked is a really beautiful event that always has options for equity operators and people that are doing you know, good work but don't have the money to afford to come, and they do pitches and help people raise money. So there's a lot of people out there that are putting folks of color, indigenous people. The Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association led by Mary Jane Oatman is incredible. There's so many good organizations. I can't even name them all. I should probably have a list that I can just list off, but really just looking for the ones like Vape Safer, like these 501c6s, the Cannabis Trail that educates bud tenders and people in media through different points in California on all of the historical things that mark why this is so powerful. You know, there's Mayabi Shields, who's doing a lot of work in science. She's a biochemist and has a PhD in pharmacology, and, you know, Cody Peterson as well. They're both, you know, in this like pharmacy and pharmacological and scientific world where they're figuring out on a molecular level how this it impacts children, how it impacts neurodivergent people and autistic people and people with depression and all kinds of things. There's people that are really doubling down on research because do you know why you can't die from cannabis? The physiological reason why you can drink a fifth of vodka and die within a few hours, but you know, do you know why?
Tell us. No.
What's your instinct, though? I'm curious. Like, what's the real reason why we don't die?
Well, here's my instinct is a little bit provided by fact. When I was younger, we basically had this kind of challenge. You know, how much could you smoke in a day? You know, whatever, kids being kids. And I smoked a whole ounce in like 4 hours, and I ended up sober again. And so what I figured was
it's just a circle. If you hit the point, you just
go through from just fucked up by like the end of 2.5 ounces out of a bong. I'm just like, dude, I can't even see straight. And then pushing to the third, I'm like, why does this feel this way? And then by the time the fuck was all over, I was like, dude, this didn't even work. So yeah,
let's get high.
Yeah.
Well, this is the beauty of our bodies and our intelligence, and the fact that, to the birthright point, that we've been co-evolving with this plant since the beginning of time. Our endocannabinoid system is stimulated by breast milk, leafy greens, and sex or massage, right? They're also saying that that's why a lot of people, like with fibromyalgia, some of these diseases that they don't know what causes it, they're actually relating it to an endocannabinoid deficiency or a cannabinoid deficiency. So usually for someone who's not eating healthy and not getting massage or having sex and, you know, probably not a baby, it's like, it's funny that they're not funny, but interesting that the types of people that are not getting one of those things are typically not getting others of them, you know, in addition to smoking cannabis. So, you know, I always say we're pleasure seekers, right? But to wrap it back to what I'm saying about why it doesn't kill you is your central nervous system has no cannabinoid receptors, which means that it cannot overpower your mainframe. It can't shut you down the way that alcohol, cocaine, other drugs, even water, like certain foods, like you can die so much easier from so many other things because we have a fail-safe system that has evolved for thousands of years in our brainstem.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, that's why I follow Cody. That's why we had him and Megan, the trusted Canada nurse, on the show earlier.
Yes.
Season. It's why we have the Cannabis Research Coalition ladies on this year as well. You know, and last year with Ashley Justice. So yeah, we really do our best to try and support that messaging. Luna, with that in mind, can you give us an idea of what you want to talk about in the second half?
I am actually totally open. There are so many things going on right now. There's a bunch of hemp bans that are coming up. There's the conversation about the hemp versus cannabis, which I argue is not a versus. They're the same plant. There is kind of going back into this hearts and minds, winning us of hearts and minds, and how we've done it here in the United States and how we're seeing to start doing it globally. I travel a lot globally. So those are really interesting topics for me as well. And then also just some of the legislative stuff that's going up that people can get involved with. You know, I mentioned a couple of it.
Yeah.
And then also,
I think you had
my
an
foray.
article or a post about your experience in Spain or about the safety of everything, and I want to follow up on that because as someone who's have not traveled the world nearly as you have, I've never not taken the plant with me ever, anywhere, ever in the world, and so I'm interested in some of those conversations. So yeah, let's get into a little hemp versus cannabis and a little global cannabis travel when we return for part 2. Folks, as always, thank you to Fat Nugs Magazine. You are the best. We couldn't do the show without you this year as our sponsor. Again, special announcement if you have not heard about it, the employee recognition program from Fat Nugs is going to be next level. It is going to call out the best in the business, from bud tenders to bosses, growers, and everybody in between. It's going to be weekly. You're going to want to be a part of it. Reach out to Justin and the team for more details. Luna, thank you so much for the first half. I look forward to the second half. Folks, as always, remember our goal with this show is to remove the stigma and uplift the plant to its rightful place in society. We hope you join us in doing so and join us for the second half. Thanks again.